Hi, this is a addendum, if you like, for Contract Law 101 Part 4. There were some things that I failed to elaborate on, so this is just a quick update, clarity on the things that I failed to explain. In a section of the video where I'm showing a postal envelope, a registered envelope, excuse me, I was stating about the 4 boxes where it describes postcode, and gave a little bit of an explanation as to it's not actually a postcode as we comprehend postcodes to be. I did explain that the idea if you're engaging in contract law and writing letters back and forth and stuff, anytime you use a postcode, use closed square brackets, write your postcode in that. Anywhere where it says sign here that's a box, don't sign in it. Put a line through it, sign your name underneath it. So basically, it's a non-conformity thing. Only slaves basically comply. Now, if you recognize you're not a slave and you're not a legal fiction or a straw man or the government securitized entity, why should you comply to their requests? It's their document, it's their problem, their issue. They want a signature out of you. Don't put it in a box. Do the opposite of what they're asking of you. Because as I said, every time you sign your name, you attest to everything being true, complete, concise, and not misleading. Unfortunately, as far as the tax declaration form goes, you can't really avoid that one because the whole bloody thing's listed in boxes. Fill out bold capital letters, and they have an individual box for each individual character. Excuse me. No, it's not COVID, it's a smoker's cough. So that's that side of when you see boxes that they expect you to put a postcode numerical response in for. Don't do it. Put a closed box, a closed caption, and write the postcode in there. I've also got to add another little bit of stuff pertaining to the letter from the ATO that I showed in the video. The point being that if you recall, I said that I could have added that an infringement penalty upon the ATO if they didn't provide or show and prove clarity in order to validate the validity of their claim. And I was thinking about it last night as I was going home. And despite that, I didn't put in that particular document by your acquiescence, which means that you agree, or actually list any penalty for their failure to supply further details. It occurred to me last night that I had it on toast anyway, because if you recall, there's 4 points that I stated that I nominated, that I sent back to them, that I wanted them to show and prove. And if you recall their response letter, they only provided an answer to a question that I didn't ask. I didn't ask if they were a corporation or incorporated. I asked them, or demanded of them, to show and prove which crown they represent. Completely different answer to the question that was asked. That aside, they didn't respond or acknowledge the other 3 points. And you have to ask yourself why. Well, I knew for a fact they weren't going to they couldn't respond to the first point, but that doesn't negate the fact that in order to verify the validity of their claim, that I demanded of them to show and prove it, that I was the addressee on their letter. Same as the alleged contract that they were assuming I had an obligation to, and where the alleged breach and the alleged contract was. So the thing is that they didn't respond to any of it. They didn't respond to any 4 points. I didn't ask them, are they a corporation or a non-corporation? I asked them to show and prove which corporation they represent. Completely different thing. They could have actually got away with it if you think about it and say, we don't represent any crown. And that would have been, there's the answer to your point that you've listed. But they didn't. They went completely the opposite field in tripping over their own feet and standing on their own tongue by actually telling me the truth, as opposed to telling a lie that would have just been from the reasoning of my point, that they didn't answer the question. They could have just said, we don't represent any crown. Now, I mean, personally, I know that's bullshit, but that's not the point of the letter that I sent them. So by fabricating a lie and trying to hide the truth, they still didn't respond to the demands of show and prove on these 4 points. And that's probably why the ATO has never bothered after 10 years in chasing me, because that's a paper trail, that document they sent me. So, like I said, their legal beagles probably turned around and said, shut up, leave it alone. Hopefully he won't go any further with this. Who knows? That's anybody's guess. And if you have the answer to why, then my suggestion to you is buy a lottery ticket, because if you can figure that one out, you'll know what next week's lotto numbers are and your chances to be a millionaire. So that was a little bit more clarity on that. So if by some unfortunate erroneous assumptions based on government department mentality that they ever decide to decide to go me again, I will use that same document, the 4-point one, but then I'll start adding into comments like, by your acquiescence, you agree to my terms and conditions, and the terms and conditions will be $25,000 fine or penalty for your failure, in compensation of me having to respond to you to verify your claim or validate your claim, and a whole heap of bunch of other things. There's also a thing that I haven't mentioned in any of these videos, which I will do now. If you ever end up in a situation where, and this pertains to paper warfare between yourself at home and some government dipshit who thinks they've got the power of authority, so government departments, whatever the case may be, it's a good idea that every time you send a document, a paper trail, it's a good idea to also send along with that, your response letter, a schedule of fees. And the reason I say that is this. Excuse me, hang on a second. Sorry about that. Labour has a value. Now, if you look at the overall bigger picture of these 4 videos that I've made, it pretty much depicts that your labour has a value. They don't like it when people work for free. They don't like it if people are volunteers for, say, a NGO, which stands for a non-government organisation, because for a non-government organisation, it's actually a charitable organisation, but it's not registered. And so because it's not registered, departments like the ATO can't audit the books. And basically the way it works is the NGO has volunteers that volunteer their time to generate revenue. And this is the significant difference. If you take a close, hard listen to what the government says, they don't say they generate income. They say they've got to generate revenue. And yet it's the working class below government who generates an income, hence income tax. The government never gets taxed, not once, not ever. Why? Because they never generate income. They generate revenue. It's the same as every time cops hand out an infringement for a speeding fine, they're generating revenue. They're not generating income. And yet it's a different word of use that the government terms that, oh, well, you know, you're a blue-collar worker, you work in a factory 40 hours a week, you generate income. But the government never generates income. They always generate revenue. And so an NGO, non-government organisation, which is a charitable organisation, doesn't generate income either. It raises or generates revenue. But you see, in order to remain a charitable organisation, it can't be for profit. So the money that the NGO will raise through its volunteers go to work for somebody else, do a small task, and instead of the volunteer being paid by the company it's performing the labour for, the volunteer says, well, look, don't pay me, give what you would have paid me to the NGO, because that's who I'm operating under on a volunteer to generate revenue for them. Some companies do it, other companies, because they think they know how the system works and don't know how the system works, and then goes, oh, that's illegal. But it's not illegal. The problem with it is they understand, companies like that understand contract law, but they only understand the contract law side of it from their perspective, because they're the ones who are engaging in a contract. They're the ones who are trying to stitch up somebody else. Whenever somebody wants you to engage in a contract, it's not for your benefit, it's for theirs. I had a mate that I worked in a couple of security companies with, and he started up his own business. And before he started up his own business, he went and worked for a mob called Security Ops, or as he preferred to call them, Security Oops. But he said they tried to offer him a contract of sorts, and I said, well, give me some information that gives you the perception it's a contract. And he said, oh, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, and in return I get this or that. And I said, yeah, well, that's a contract. Offer and acceptance. I said, absolutely, it's a contract. They might title it employer-employee negotiation, but that's still a contract. It's a contract between two parties. I said, anything you've got to sign your name to that, you know, that's deemed as, oh, well, we'll let you work 30 hours a week, but you take a pay cut of X amount, or you get 2 weeks of holiday pay, not 4 weeks of holiday pay, or whatever the arrangement is, it's offer and acceptance. That's a part of contract law. It's dead set a contract. They want you to sign it. That's a contract. He said, yeah, I thought as much. And I said, well, you know, I've been talking about this for a few years now, so you know 3/4 of what I know because I keep talking about it. You know. He said, yeah, I kind of figured it was, but I just wanted to hear it from you, whether it was or wasn't, or whether I was just fooling myself. I said, no, it's absolutely a contract. And so he went back to Security Oops and said, stick it up your ass, I'm not interested. And with that, they said, well, there's no more work for you. And when he told me about that, I said, well, there's the proof in the pudding. You didn't play their game. You refused to sign your life away. And what did they do? They let you go. Why? Because you basically told them, I'm not going to allow you to control me. End of story. Not going to happen. And that, after that is when he started up his own business. But that aside, schedule of fees. Your labour has a value, and it's not a skill set that the government provided for you. And it's not a privilege. You can dispense with labour, not because you have to, but because you can. You were born with the ability, as you get older, to swing a shovel, swing a pick, drive a nail into a piece of wood. That's not a skill set that government gave you. You were born with the ability to provide labour. So labour has a value. So if you have to deal with some dead shit in the government department and thinks that all the lights are shining in their favour, they might be and they might not be, depending on the scenario. But if you have to sit down for however long a time it takes you to write up a document, the cost of ink to print the letter out, buy a pen to sign it, an envelope to send it, the fee for person to person or confirmation of signature. All these are bills you have to pay in order to respond to these idiots. And so therefore, if you were to say, well, okay, $150 or $250 for clerical work, because you are being a secretary at that point. You are doing tedious, menial clerical work. You are writing all this stuff out. You don't have a secretary that does it for you, so you're entitled for your time. Time is labour intensive, and labour has a value. And you can put down whatever price you want. You can make it as ludicrous as you want, or as accommodating as you like. It's your choice. Why? Because it's your fees. You set down what your time is worth, not them. They may not agree with it. Tough. You didn't ask for them to put in an input as to whether they perceive or believe that your time is worth that amount. It's what it means to you, not them. They're the recipient of it, not the dictators of it. The only reason people don't get paid for what their time is worth is because they are, unfortunately, in a position to be dictated by an employer as to what he is prepared to pay for the labour. Now, if you think that what you're getting paid as an hourly rate is below the standard of what you think your labour is worth, then you're going to work to the level of what you perceive the hourly rate is dictating to you. So if you're on $19 an hour for shoveling up a bloody 4 ton of dirt, and you think that's worth $20-25 an hour, you're going to work for that $20 or $25 an hour. But if you're only getting paid $19, you're only going to do $19 an hour worth of work. Stands to reason. So when I started freelancing security, people with security firms were telling me, oh yeah, we're only paying this. And I said, well, I'm sorry for wasting your time. They said, what do you mean? I said, my labour is worth more than that. I won't get out of bed for under $25 an hour. End of story. Oh, well, we're not paying that, and hence I can't work for you. Well, you can't make those sort of negotiations. Absolutely I can. It's my ability to provide labour, not yours. You need a job done. I can do it. And I'm happy to do it, but I'm happy to do it at the price that I think the value of my labour is worth, not what you think it's worth. And it's, what did I say? Basically, I've just explained out a verbal sense of a employer-employee negotiation. It's a contract. But unfortunately, we've been left with the perception and thinking that government gave us the skill set to be able to apply labour. And they didn't. Sure, some people might take on a trade, and that's a different scenario. Why? Because they've been taught how to do something. But as far as picking up a shovel, swinging a pick, driving a nail into a lump of wood, that's just something that you are capable of doing. And so your labour has a value. So if you don't agree with what you are being offered for your labour, negotiate on it. You have the right to do that. Okay. The employer might stick to his guns and say no, and say, well, okay, I'm sorry for wasting your time, see you later. Find somebody else that's going to be your lapdog pet and work for nothing. I'm not going to do it. And I guess it comes down to know who you are. You're either somebody of worth, or you're going to allow somebody else to tell you what your worth is. For me, I know who I am, I know what I'm not, and if I'm not prepared to do that, even though I'm capable of doing that, I'll do it for this price. You don't want to pay that, that's fine, I don't give a shit. You want me to do it and know the job's going to be done right, I'm your man. Pay what I expect. And I don't ask for ludicrous, stupid amounts like Sparkies or plumbers sit there and say, oh yeah, we bill out at $67 an hour. No need to do that. I mean, that's the problem with a trade. You spend 4 years learning a trade, and then you become fully qualified, and it's practically a license to print money. You can bill whatever you like. Somebody's going to pay it, or somebody won't pay it. If somebody pays it, great. Concrete is a classic example. You can get 3 different quotes, there'll be 3 different prices. Depends on who wants the work and how badly they want it. If somebody doesn't need the work that bad, they'll just say, yeah, give you a bogus, outrageous price, forcing you to say, yeah, I'm not going to use you, buddy, it's all good. So that's pretty much sums it up for the addition that I had to make for part 4 that I didn't elaborate enough on part 4, which was basically schedule of fees. I do have a template that, again, is on a hard drive, but I can always pull up another one. I know my dad's got a couple. I think that's where I got mine from. I'm reasonably sure that it's an editable document, which means you can change things around, put more things in, remove some stuff, alter the amounts, and everything pretty much comes down to, as far as your time in typing out a letter and everything else, X amount per hour. So you could say $150 per hour, minimum 4 hours. Remember, it's your time. You dictate what your time is worth, not them, you. And so if you go into a court scenario, excuse me a minute, if you go into a court scenario and you have to submit documents as evidence, submit a schedule of fees. Do it. Submit a schedule of fees, period, all the time. It might get accepted and it might not, but if you don't, one thing's for sure, it never will. So if you have an argument, a paper warfare with cops, where they send you a document and you send them a document back, send a schedule of fees with your response document. And usually one or two things happen. They'll either let it go, or they'll keep on with it, and the longer they keep on with it, the more they agree to the schedule of fees. You also have to put down in your paper warfare document, associated with this letter is on a separate paper, my schedule of fees. It is suggested, don't say advised, say suggested. It is suggested that you view it. You've given them the warning to do it. If they don't do it, that's on them. If it goes to a court scenario and say, and the schedule of fees come up and they say, oh, we didn't see that, and you can pull up a copy of the letter you sent them and said, well, excuse me, but it's written on the bottom here, I strongly suggest you read the schedule of fees. Like I said in part 4, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. You can lead a human to something, but you can't make it accept it. So it's up to you. Nothing is impossible. The only thing you are limited by is your own is your own confidence of interfering with limitation. The world is yours. You want to strive for the world? Go and take it. It's that simple. Don't let anybody say, no, you can't do this or you can't do that. If they do, make them prove it. Make them back their claim or their allegation. It's a simple way around it. But you've got to be aware, every time you do something against the system, there usually is consequence for it. Challenging a cop on his authority is one classic example. If you challenge his authority, he tends to get nasty about it. Why? Because that's the only tactic he knows. He can't be rational because he can't afford to let you challenge his presumed authority. So what's he do? He resorts to a charge and fabricate some bullshit allegation that you didn't do. Why? Because he knows that in order to charge you, you actually have to commit an offence. And challenging a police officer's presumed authority is not a crime. So they have to fabricate a crime. Straight off of that point, it's fraud. It helps if somebody is observing the scenario, or if you can pull up video footage to verify what would ultimately be a statement of fact that I didn't commit this crime and here's the proof. Coppers usually drop their bullshit when it comes down to that you can prove it, or they lie through their teeth in court upon pain of perjury. But anyway, that's the update for part 4. Part 5, which is going to be the absolute final one, the final video I make, that is going to be purely based on my hypothesis and theory of how can we divorce ourselves from the government securitized entity. Personally, I can't see anybody doing it. I haven't done it, but I'm waiting for something else to happen before I decide to give it a lash. But I'll explain the hypothesis and the theory in the next video, which should be not too far away. Until then, take care, keep safe, love one another.